Hi, this is Everett's Watercolors. Welcome to my classroom. Now, today we're live again from Chesapeake, Virginia, and I'm here in my studio with my wife, Gloria.
Welcome.
And she's going to take care of monitor the broadcast and also check the chat room. I'm going to put the chat room on right now. I'm going to just liven it up. There we go. Now, today I'm going to be painting some rocks. But you know, rocks are very interesting subjects because they add some interest to a landscape. They also provide you with shapes and some sort of subject matter that's interesting to look at. But there's a lot of little details I can show you about. But I'm going to do a small painting today, but really it's going to be a lot of rocks involved. And I'll show you how I handle that and also give you some advice and give you some tips on how to do it. So let me go to my painting table, and I'm going to go with starting with painting rocks. I'll turn my light on. Okay. I'll move my mic over so you can hear me. Okay. The thing about rocks, the thing I always think about before I start, I always think about, okay, what is a rock? It's a shape, but it's also a rugged. It has a angular or a smooth side to it. It's also rough and it's earthy. It's got an earthy tone to it, an earthy color, and it's been weathered. It's been sitting out in the weather a lot, so it's either wet or damp or maybe a little moss on it. So there's a lot of things in a rock that you can paint. Now I'm going to paint some rocks today to give you some of my techniques. And so let's go over here and let me first of all I'll go over my material. Then I'll start with some demonstration here. I usually go off with my colors here. I'm going to use a little bit of yellow ochre, which is down here on the bottom of my palette. Yellow lemon, which is right next to yellow ochre. Then ultramarine blue here at the top of my palette. And burnt sienna, go back down to the bottom here, burnt sienna. This orangey brown. And then I'm going to use Quinacridone violet, which is a beautiful violet color here, Quinacridone. And green number 1. We've got some trees and grass in the painting today. And then cerulean blue. I'm going to use cerulean blue up here at the top. And I got a little bit of water to show, so not a large amount, but just a little bit. And I may also put a little bit of Quinacridone gold over here. This is a nice golden yellow. I may use that for some of my mixtures. So I'll be using Gemini watercolor paper, which I'll get to in a moment. I'm going to do a demonstration here on 60-pound paper. And these are Holbein artist watercolors, which I just described. And I'm going to be using Holbein brushes, which I'll go over in a minute. And I'll be using palette in a bottle, which is I'll be using a fine mist sprayer with a black top. Palette in a bottle, fine mist sprayer, which is on my website. All these items here I've discussed here is on my website, everettswatercolors.com. Okay. Um, it could be the focusing on the camera. Okay, I was gonna describe the brushes. I'm gonna be using Holbein watercolor brushes. This is the 1-inch flat. This is a synthetic. I'm gonna be using also the 3/4-inch flat and the 1/2-inch flat. Those are a nice set of flat brushes that I have on my website, everettswatercolors.com. I'll also be using the number 16 round, which is a nice round brush, synthetic, but it comes to a nice fine point, so it's good for a little detail. And for little fine areas, I'll be using the number 8 round, which is also a synthetic brush. These are all synthetic brushes, but they're very nice and they're very reasonably priced on my website, everettswatercolors.com. So we'll get started here. I'm going to do a little demonstration here. Okay, first thing I want to do is talk about color. Let's see. So the first thing will be I'm going to use a little light color. I'll start with a little bit of a little bit of yellow ochre, And a shape. A shape of a rock is very irregular. It's not fancy. It could be just a bulky looking shape. And then this one here, I'm going to put a little bit of ultramarine blue here to give it a shadow pattern. Mix it in a little bit of that brown, burnt sienna, and a little bit of ultramarine. Give it a little shadow pattern. So a basic rock would have probably a couple of colors to it, but also would have a shadow and an irregular rough edge shape for the silhouette. And you can get as dark as you want on this. You can go darker. Okay, now let's take let me take another combination here. We'll use the same colors. A little bit of I'll put a little bit of purple in there. Use a little bit of Quinacridone violet, a little bit of ultramarine, a little bit of burnt sienna. Give it a nice, colorful. And again, give it a rock shape. It's going to be doesn't have to be square, doesn't have to be round. It can be irregular. Now on this one here, to give it a little bit of texture, I'm going to take up. This is a piece of Saran wrap, just ordinary. And I'm going to crumple it up. And I'm just going to take it and just going to push it right into it. Just push it right into that color you just put down on the paper. Just pressing it down. I'm going to leave it there for a few minutes, okay? So let's go on to another one. I'm going to mix up a little darker now. Use the ultramarine, blue, some more burnt sienna, a little quinacridone. Get a nice dark color going here. Maybe pick up a little bit of Payne's gray. Darken up even more. Okay, now what I can do now is use the spray bottle. This is a Tylenol bottle of dot spray with just water in it, and I'm just going to spray a little bit of. And right away you can see some dots in there, but as it dries, I'm going to put some more spray on there. So we'll let that sit for a minute. Let me take this off. Look at the texture on that. You can see the texture on that one I put the Saran wrap on. You know, and you can play around with that. Once you get started, you can play around with that. You can take the brush in and move around. Put another shadow pattern on that. So what I'm trying to show you here is the rocks are very, very irregular. I think I'm probably moving that up next to the camera, so we'll just have to let it settle down. Now, one quick demonstration here. I can also use a stencil. Now, this is an old piece of watercolor paper, and I can just put cut out a stencil of a rock shape, and put that down on the paper. We'll use this side right here. And I'm going to take my towel. I'm going to take a towel. You can take paper towels, or I'm using my painting towel here. Kind of block out the edges a little bit, okay? And then I'm going to let's take my round brush here. Let's take the number 16 round. I'm going to mix up some of the same colors. A little bit of ultramarine, a little bit of burnt sienna. Load that brush, and then I'm going to splatter just by hitting the brush against my hand. That'll give me a nice spattered pattern. And then I can take the spray bottle, I pound the bottle, and I can go up here and I lift it up and just drop some water down on top of that. And if I want to take that same brush and put a little shape to that, I could just take some of that paint that's on there and kind of move it around a little bit. So I can kind of play with this. I can leave some of the dots on there from splattering. And I can take a brush to move around the shape, move the paint around a little bit. Okay, those are some real basic techniques on making rocks. If you want to do an individual rocks or something like that. So that's just kind of a warm-up exercise for putting paint on the paper, and then either playing with just adding more color for shadows. And then here I put the saran wrap on, and here I just put the spray bottle. And you can see those dots already forming, irregular shapes down here. That's the spray bottle on top of the paint, and now it's drying. You can see the different texture look on that. Then this one here, I just used a stencil idea and just splattered it with the paintbrush, and then went back with a spray bottle to loosen up those dots. The spray bottle loosened up the dots. Then took a paintbrush and moved some of the paint around. Just some fun techniques to play around with. So that's a good warm-up exercise for when you're working on rocks. Here I did this earlier. I did the same thing. I put a shadow pattern here. I used the saran paper. It was a spray, and down here I used a stencil down here. So there's another idea of just getting some shapes of rocks. Okay, so that's the general idea for painting a simple rock, for a landscape or a seascape. I've used them in both situations. Now I'm going to bring my material out now to start a small painting. So give me a second here while I get this organized. Okay. Okay, this first photograph, this is kind of a reference photograph I took last weekend. Went out and did some plein air on the weekend. This is kind of one of a reference program. That you can see here a lot of rocks here in the foreground, and there was an old bridge here or a little dock where you could take off the boats, and there's some grass over here in the background, just some trees, and a little bit of water showing. So I like this idea, and I zoomed in on it. So I zoomed in on it with my camera and took a close-up shot. You can see all these rocks down here in the foreground. Still kept the elements up here, so zooming in. Then I did a plein air on site. I did this sketch. So I did this plein air sketch on site location. Again, I was painting some of the rocks and the little fence line here, fence posts, fence rails, and some of the trees and so forth around, a little bit of background. Okay, so that was kind of a warm-up. Then I said, well, I decided, well, this is going to be my program this week. So this is you know, as I was painting this location, the sun was out, and about 45 minutes to an hour later, you can see when the sun comes out, it dried up some of the wet rocks that were here. If you remember, this photograph here shows the rocks that were very wet. They had a lot of water on them from the tide. And then as the sun came out, you can see the rocks were dried out on the top and so forth. So this is what really inspired me, was these shapes and colors was what inspired me for this little exercise painting today. So my painting plan, then I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this close-up for my painting plan, but I'm going to also borrow from the texture here for these rocks. So taking both photographs, I'm going to use both of these as my reference. Okay, as always, I start out with a little sketch, a little diagram of how my design plan, and you can see here I'm going to focus on doing the foreground rocks. I'll call it foreground rocks. Then in the middle ground, where this will be my area of interest or focal point, will be this fence post and these rails, a little bit of the grass over here. And here's the background here, some background trees, a little bit of water down here. So this is kind of what I'm going to focus on today. Okay. Now, when I was out there, another good point here is that when I went to the location here to paint this, I walked 360 degrees. I went in the front, I went to the side, I went around to the back. I couldn't get into the water exactly, but I went about 290 degrees around this location to see what angle would be the best. So it's always a good time when you see something you like, just go walk around, maybe to the side or go around to the back, and take another look. You may find a more interesting or an unusual viewpoint. I'm always looking for an unusual viewpoint, something that's a little bit different. in something that's a little bit unique and an abstract shape. But this is where I'm going to start from. This is my design sketch and my design plan. Then I'm going to use the information I got from the plein air study, my plein air study plan, my plein air study sketch, and of course the photographs I have, which I took on location. So those are my tools that I use to get started here. Now I've transferred the sketch to my 140-pound Gemini watercolor paper, and it's on a quarter sheet. This is measures 11 by, let's see, 15 by 11 size sheet of paper. And you can see I've already sketched out some of the diagram, the fence line and so forth, and I put in some rock shapes down here. Okay. Okay, now the clue here I'm starting out with is that I don't paint every rock on here. I'm going to paint in some rocks. It's just like painting a brick wall in a house. You don't need to paint all the individual bricks. Just paint some of the bricks or some of the shapes, and then the rest of the wall can be inferred. In fact, the viewer will translate that into a brick wall if you just show enough information to translate that. And that's what I'm going to do today. This area down here, I'm going to simplify and just give you a couple of shapes to focus on, and then you'll believe that those are a bunch of rocks. So that's my plan today. So the first thing I'm going to do is, this is the foreground. From here on down is the foreground. I'm going to wet the paper first. I'll re-wet the paper. I'm going to use the 1-inch flat Holbein brush and clear water. So I'm going to wet the paper here. This will help the paint flow a lot better and a lot easier. It's be wet on wet, so I'm going to have a gradual wetting and a gradual coloring of the paper. But the wet on wet technique will give me a little less defined, and that's exactly what I want. I don't want everything to be, I don't want hard edges. I want soft edges down here in the beginning. I'll start out with soft edges, and I can harden up some of the edges to give detail. But I don't want a lot of detail down here. I just want color and a little bit of contrast and a little bit of variation. So if I'll check my paper, I just want to make sure the paper is wet evenly. I don't want to have any blotches or any pools of water. So I'll check the shine on the paper. And spreading out the paper, make sure the wetness is about the same everywhere. Okay. Okay, now I'm going. Now it takes a minute or two for the water to soak in and get it nice and wet. So I'm going to let that set for a minute while I mix up my paints. Okay, the first colors I'm going to put down. I'm going to start with a light color. I'm going to start with a light color, a light warm color. So I'm going to use the yellow ochre and the lemon yellow, yellow lemon, maybe just a touch of burnt sienna. So I'm using a lighter color here of my palette layout. And I'm putting a lot of water in it because that lightens it up even more. So I'm going to put a lot of color in there. A lot of water in there, but I'm also wetting it down. Okay, now at the same time, I'm going to mix up a darker cool color. So I'm going to use my Ultramarine up here in the top. And I'm going to bring a little bit of that Quinacridone violet in. A little bit of violet into that mix. A little bit of violet. I'm going to put a lot of water though. I don't want this really, really dark yet. I'm going to start out with a nice wet area. So I'll mix that little darker brand up there. Okay, so now I'm ready to go. My paper is still, let me check the paper again. Okay, it's still damp. All right, so I'm going to get started. So I'm going to start out at the top. Now I'm starting out here at the top of the middle ground here. And I'm going to start with the lighter color. lighter color and a lighter value. It's warm. A warmer color. It's got a little bit of, remember, it's got a little bit of yellow ochre in it, a little bit of lemon yellow in it. So it makes it a nice light warm color. A little bit grayed down, but that's okay. Rocks have that gray tone to them sometimes. They don't have to be all bright. You don't have real bright colors for rocks. So you can use a more neutral color here. I don't want a hard edge up here, so I'll take a little bit of water and kind of lighten that up a little bit up here. And maybe I'll pick up just a little bit here on the edge. I'm going around just picking up a little bit of the extra, make it a nice and soft edge. Okay, now, while I'm still going, I'm moving down. Now I'm going to get a little bit cooler, so I'm going to pick up a little more of this ultramarine blue mix with a lot of water in it. And this is going to be cooler down here. It's going to be still a light, it's going to be a light cool, but it's going to be a lighter value, but it's going to have a cooler color to it. So this area down here is going to be cooler, and it's still going to be a light value. I just want a light value. I just want to get the paper covered. Now I can use crisscross brush strokes because I want to build up a little texture here by moving the brush back and forth. But it's going to be an even wash. I'm not, because I've wet the paper, so it's going to have an even wash to it. It's like a gradated. It's like a gradated wash. I've got warm at the top and cool at the bottom. So this is what you call a gradated wash. Going from a light color, a warm color to a cool color, be a graded wash. And I kept the values very similar, so it's also an even wash. And by even, I mean it's got about the same consistency of wetness. In other words, the paper is about the dampness of the paint is about the same in both the warm color and the cool color. So it keeps the value of those colors almost the same. They're almost the same value, just a different color. All right, now so while that's drying a little, I'm gonna let that dry. I'm gonna go ahead and start putting in some of the detail up here. I'm gonna go ahead and start putting in the I'm going to start working on the focal point. So I'm going to take a little bit of green mixed in with the burnt sienna, and I'm going to put these fence posts in. Use a little bit of green mixed in with burnt sienna. Now I'm going to start with the green number 1 up here mixed in with the brown, and then I'm going to pick up a little more of the burnt sienna. I'm going to mix in. I always change the color part way down so we don't have a constant mix. So there's also a gradated wash here, even on the fence post. Gradated wash. I'll put this other one in. So I'm starting out with the green mixture, green number 1 with burnt sienna. Then I'll pick up a little bit more burnt sienna and continue on, changing the color a little bit, and then picking up a little bit more color, maybe a little bit of blue in there, just a slight touch of blue, darken it up a little bit, and also to change the color. Okay. Now out here, I'm getting right here is the focal point. So out here, I just want to make it's not going to be as well defined, but I'm going to still put the same colors out here, and we'll take care of that toward the end of the painting, how we take care of that. So again, I change the color and move it on down to the base here. All right. Okay, now also I got those railings, so let's take some of that burnt sienna now. That burnt sienna. Let me maybe move the board slightly. Let's see, I'm gonna do a horizontal stroke here. Now I'm using I'm loading the brush, take out a lot of the excess water. I'm going to use more of I like a dry brush stroke. I want to have a little bit of dry brush here, just a little bit of dry brush maybe, if I can get it going here. Take out a lot of moisture. So this shows that this is a made out of wood, but it's also got some roughness to it. Give it a little bit of texture. So just a little bit of paint on the brush, and then drag it across. I'm using the side of the brush, not the point, not the point. I'm using the side of the round brush, and I'm dragging it across that shape to give me a rough texture, make it look like wood. You know, we're not finished. That's just a starting point. Remember, I usually start out by putting a layer down first, then go back and put a second layer. Over here, there's some weeds growing up, so I'm going to just do a little hit and miss here, just to leave some room for the weeds to come through. Okay, I got a couple more I want to put in. There's another railing up here. Let's see. Here's this a railing. It's a little bit smaller, but I'm still going to give it that rough texture. I'm dragging the brush across in a dry brush motion. Dry brush means I got very little moisture in the brush. Mostly paint, very light color paint right now. And I'm taking out, I'm hitting it on a tissue to take out a lot of the water. So I get and I'm dragging it sideways to give me a rough texture. And this is also just an indication that there's something out here, because I'm going to put weeds up here on top of that. Now we got one more railing. Take some more of that burnt sienna. I'll put that at the top here. Dry brush technique. A little bit of paint in the brush. Take a lot of water out by hitting the tissue with the brush, taking the water out. And drag it sideways across the area. It'll give me a dry brush stroke. And I'm just putting in this shape here right now, because I'll go back and we'll put in some more detail. We'll be on more detail at the end when I go in and do the final touches. Okay. Now while I'm down here at the near the focal point area, I'm also going to take some of this green number 1 and mix it. I never use the pure pigment. I always mix it. I put a little bit of yellow lemon in with it. Give me a mixture. And I'm going to put a little bit of grass down here at the around this post. Just a little bit. Put a little green down here. A bit of green grass popping up around this post. A little bit over here also. A bit of green grass. Some tall weeds growing around the base of this post. And then there's some tall grass here, which I'll just start putting some of the bases in, some of the baseline. And also, let me take a bigger brush. I like to use a round brush. I'll use a round brush here with. I'll mix up that same light color, just it's a light green. Green number 1. Green number 1. Start with the base color green, and then add a little bit of color to it, which would be yellow lemon, and maybe a little bit of yellow ochre into it, because I want to dull it down a little bit. Don't want to have it pure green. And then I'll go back here. There's a tree back here, so I'm just going to go ahead and just dap it in. So I'm just going to put some color back here, just to indicate there's a tree or a bush or something back here growing back here, and it's near the impact area, but it's not. The impact area is going to be right in here. This is kind of off to the side. Okay. All right. Okay, now I'm ready to put the rocks in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use another tool. I'm going to use a paintbrush, but then I'm also going to use an old credit card, and I'm going to scrape out some shapes. And I may even use the palette knife. Okay, those are two tools I'm going to introduce here. So first thing I'm going to do now is in this light area, I'm going to mix up a little darker mix. And it's mainly going to be warmer. I'm going to take that darker mix and I'll put a little more burnt sienna in there, just a touch of burnt sienna. I'm going to dull it down a little bit of Payne's gray. Just take off. I don't want to be a burnt sienna color. I want to be another color, just a little duller. Okay, now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint across this area, and I'll define some edges up here, which are rock edges up here at the top. So the rocks have sharp edges to them, or hard edges. So to indicate that, we're going to have a hard edge up here next to the outline of these rocks. But notice here, I'm also varying the shape up here. I don't have a straight line, so I've got up and down, in and out, to give me a little bit of variation on the edge. All right, so I'm putting in this dark mixture here. And I'm coming over here now to this other area, and I'm going to add some edges. Edge of the rock to making sure they're sharp. Maybe it's a round one, not all square. And a little sharp edge over here. And continuing on with this mixture of darker. It's a darker warm color. I started out with a warm color, so I'm staying with a warm value or the warm colors up here in the top of this area. Okay, now I'm also watching the shine up here because I want to make sure this thing stays wet before I start on the next one. Well, while that's still drying a little bit, let me mark up, and I'm going to put the darker color. I'm going to pick up a little bit of ultramarine and pick up a little bit more of quinacridone violet. So this is going to be a cool mix down here at the bottom. Okay, I'm going to put that in and overlap some of this warmer area up here. So this is this will be a cool mixture down here at the bottom. Now up here I'm going to start pulling off some of the paint now. This is still damp up here, but I can go in now and put in some shapes. So now I'm using the edge and this edge and the side of this credit card, and I'm scraping out some of the shapes of rocks. Up here, and these are a little bit further away, so I'm making a little smaller motions here. I'm not making large rocks up here. I'm making kind of medium size. But now I'm going to different angles. I'm going to go sideways, up and down, curve some. Now as I come down, I'm going to get a little bit bigger on my sizes. changing the angle, scraping down, making over here it's not going to be as well defined. Okay, this is still a little wet now. Let me go down and continue with the bottom down here. I still got time. Putting in this cooler mixture down here at the bottom. And that's ultramarine, a little bit of burnt sienna. Oh, quinacridone violet. I put quinacridone violet and ultramarine down here for the cool colors. Little crisscross stroke. That'll give me a little bit of texture here and there. That's okay, no problem. Just spreading out the color. Now up here, while this is still wet, I can shape in some of these edges now with the palette knife. And also, I noticed in the, and I'll show this to you when I get finished with this a little bit, but I also have a design here that I want to put in. You know, these are a little bit larger down, so I can go a little bit harder, move a little bit faster down here because I got more room. These rocks are larger down here at the base. The foreground here, the rocks are much larger because they're closer to me, so they appear larger. As I get upward, I'm going to get a little bit smaller, but as I come back down, I'm going to use bigger motion here to get bigger size. And now I'm going to go with a palette knife now. I'm going to do some shaping, just a little bit of shaping here. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start forming some of these shapes to give me some direction lines, because I want the direction lines to start pointing toward the impact area. And that's very important to have something that gives you a pathway. Okay. Now I'm going to take a smaller brush, and I'm going to take some of that burnt sienna with a bit of blue in it, a little darker brown, and I'm going to start putting in some of those lines that I like. Put something there, maybe something here. So right now I'm really emphasizing some of these points now that are showing up, so I can emphasize some of these marks in the rocks. And if I want your eye to go here, I'm going to have some lines moving in that direction. I'll use the lines or the edges of the rocks to show that direction. I'll pick up more of the blue color, the cool color now, the black ultramarine blue. So I'm using a little technique here that's allows me to direct the eyes toward the impact area. So I'm just beginning to build this up. I can go back in later and also add more dimension here. Let me wipe off the excess moisture here on the edges. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry a little bit. I'll go back and work a little bit more out. Next thing I want to work on is a background. I've got some trees back here, but these are going to be very simple trees. So I'll take a little bit of, let me move this aside. And I'm going to use the round brush for this. Use the round brush. And mix up a little bit. Now the green, I'm going to mix in a little bit of ultramarine. I'm going to use a little bit of this Quinacridone gold. Quinacridone gold mixed in with ultramarine gives me a nice dark green. And I'm going to put that into the background. These are the background trees along this waterway. This scene is in the waterway. I'll use a small flat, the half-inch flat brush now to bring it down. Now there's a shoreline over here. This is the background trees, but it comes along the shore. Then the waterway has a body of water that goes behind this fence line, or no, not fence line. It's just this is a railing that goes you to the little boat dock they have to get into the boats. So I'll go around these fence posts. Now I'm going to change the value to make it look like there's trees back there, just by putting a little bit of texture back there, indicating that there's some trees. So just a few brush strokes that's all you need, just to give some hint that there's a tree line back there, and that's all you have to do. These are dark trees back here behind this little boat dock and next to the water. Okay. Break that up a little bit, a little value change back there, a little shape change, indicating there's trees there in the background. That's fine. Now I'm going to take a little dollar color. I'm going to put a little bit of blue into that. And of course, there's a reflection now into the water. And from the sky, it'll be a little blue sky. So I'm going to have a little bit of blue mixed in with that green tree shape, or green tree color. So I mix a little bit of ultramarine blue. And I'm going to bring that down here into the water. Now this is a reflection, so I paint the reflection in a vertical direction. This is the trees now reflecting into that water. And it comes across. There's a little ramp here. I'm going to put that back in. I forgot to put that in on the first move, but it's not an important section. But it's enough there just to hint. I'll have a little hint there. There's a ramp going down to load up the boats, to walk onto the boats. They have a lot of kayakers out here and sailboats, things like that, and power boats, which they go here and load into the water. So I'm painting the reflection. This water goes all the way back here, behind this railing, in front of the trees. And I'll go back here a little bit more. Down here, about right here. And paint this in between the I'm not gonna rush this, but I'm gonna try to move ahead quickly here, just to indicate what I want to get to. This is more of the water between the rails, and the water goes right on down just in front of the rocks. Now I'll put a little indication here of some of those tree shapes reflecting into the water, just by putting a little bit of color change there in that reflection color. Okay, water goes behind here, and a little bit more over here. Let's see, go about part way here. Just paint enough in there, enough color in there to give the impression of what it is. Um, okay, what I'll do, I'll put it in that railing over here. There's a little, I'll take just a really light brown and put in this. The ramp goes down here. Again, I'll use a little dry brush stroke. Ramp goes down into the next to the water where the boats, you load up the boats. Okay, and now I'm going to start putting just a little bit. Now I'm ready to put a little bit of detail into it now. So uh, over here, on this tree, this little tree over here on the left side, I'm going to put a little texture. Now I use a natural sponge and load it up with a little bit of dark green paint. Mix it up a little bit of dark green. I use a little bit of that ultramarine, a little bit of that Quinacridone gold. And I'll pick it up with a sponge. I'll go back here now. I'm going to put a little bit of texture back here into this tree, just a little bit. So I'll use a natural sponge. Give me some of that. It looks like leaves back there, and that's all I want to do. Just show that it looks like leaves. I'm done with that. And I'm going to take the same color, and I'm going to put out some branches out here. So these branches will come off this tree and will overlap with the background. Okay. And now I'm going to take my, yeah, I guess I'll use another brush. Take this same mixture of green, put a little more green, put a little green number 1 into it, and maybe a little bit of yellow lemon. And I'm going to go in here and do some grass. These are tall grass that's growing up here next from the rocks in front of this railing area. These are tall weeds that are growing up here behind the rocks. And I can go ahead and, what I'll do, I think I'll extend this bush one down here and make it a little bit lighter. And put some darker grass here around the bottom of these taller grass. And I'll take a little bit of that yellow ochre. I'm using a number four round rigger from Holbein. This is I didn't introduce this in the beginning with the other round brush, but I also use the rigger brush for fine lines like this. Filling in some of the space here with some brown mixed in with a green. They give us these tall weeds are brown and green. And I take a little bit of that color there. I'll fill in. Okay. This part down here, there's only one one little patch of blue I put in. That's for the sun, the sky, and a little bit of cerulean blue. I said it was only just a patch, and I've lightened it up a little bit. And there's just a little bit of patch of blue here from the sun, from the sky. I'll put that down here. Over top of the trees. A little water, mixed a little bit of water to lighten up a little bit, just a little bit. Just a hint of some of the sky showing. A little bit of blue sky. It was the sun out that morning. Okay, now I'm going to dress up my impact area just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is on this fence line, I'm going to pick up a little bit of orange, yellow orange. With the burnt sienna, just to get a little brighter mix here. So I'm going to come in now, right here. And as I go over here toward the right, I'm going to fade this out. This will be brown, but then as I go out further and further out to the edge, I get less detail. The only detail I want is right in this area here. So here I'm really what I'm doing now is I'm really enhancing the color around the impact area. Increasing the color a little bit, enhancing it, adding a little more intensity here. But then as I go out and away from it, I'm going to get less intense. I still want some color there, but I don't want it as intense as around the impact area. Okay. This area down here, again, a little bit of orange, yellow, a little bit of yellow orange, and a little bit of burnt sienna. Just add a little more interest there to that impact area. So that's really going to make the impact area show up. A little bit of change of color, a little bit of detail, a little bit of contrast, sharp edges. Don't want to overdo it, but just to give it, this is an important area that I want the eye to go to. So it's the one that has all the focal point. It's the one that has all the attention. A little bit less as we go out. Okay. Now on the other side, I'll do the same thing. Take a little bit of burnt sienna. And maybe in shadow, I might put a little bit of blue mixed in with that. to give a little, it might be in shadow back here, not too much. That up. On this side, I just, now here the weeds are showing up, so I'm going to just put a little bit next to the post. As I move away, there'll be some, just a hint that there's a railing in there in between the weeds. It shows up next to the post, and that's about it. Okay. And down here, same thing, a little bit darker here. That shadow. Next to the post, it's in shadow, and as we move over, it's broken up with the weeds. Okay, now what I might do also is put a little shadow on the post itself. Just come along the edge here and put a little darker color right here to show the shadow on this post. And maybe one over here. Just a little shadow. Okay. Now the only thing I would do now, last thing I want to do is just go in, I want to put some more marks in here. Just to finish it off. If you look at the if you look at this photograph here, there are some lines moving here toward those fence posts. And that's what I was trying to do. Some of these areas are like shadows on the rock, but they point you toward the center of interest, which is what I was trying to do here. Just pick up some of these shapes, some of these edges of the rocks, and just to emphasize the edge and to give it some direction. Okay. Now the last thing I was going to demonstrate here was the using a spray bottle. This is pound a bottle dot sprayer, sold exclusively at everettswatercolors.com. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the cobalt blue, and I'm going to take this fine mist bottle with the black top, and I'm going to switch the tops out. I'm going to put the fine mist sprayer over top on the top of the cobalt blue bottle dot spray. Okay, so the only thing that's changed here, it's the same bottle, but I'm using a different top. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tone down the edges of this painting. And what I mean by that is I'm going to, let's see, first of all, I'll use my towel. I'll start here in this corner here. I'm going to cover up the area. Now I'm going to come back. I'm going to hold it back about 12 inches away from the corner. I'm going to back up, and I'm going to lightly tap, press down. I'm going to put a light mist across that corner. I will knock that down. I'm going to go over here on this corner. Hold it back, hold it back, holding it back about 12 inches away. Put that color in. Then we'll go up here on this same corner here. I'm going to go up here and cover up the area I don't want to get sprayed on. Hold it back about 12 inches. Okay. Now the drops that I have on there, I can just take a brush and move, just light them up, just move them around so they don't show as dots. Okay. Sometimes when you play with a sprayer or the fine mist sprayer, you'll get dots. Not necessarily you want that way, because dot sprayer will give you all kinds of dots, but sometimes you'll get a dot with a fine mist sprayer. Okay, then go off this corner here. I'm going to do all four corners. Okay, holding it back about 12 inches on this far corner. Okay, and I can take the brush and take away those drops with a brush. Okay. And then the last step I can do is I can take the flat brush with some color on it, preferably gray or a light dull color. Just gray color would do just fine. And I'm going to go in. I'm going to go across here just with some paint. What I'm doing is knocking down the edges of this painting. I can go over here, do the same thing. What I'm doing is I'm putting away a lot of the detail on the edges. I don't want anything down here to show any interest other than the impact area. So right now the glow of the painting now is all right here, right here. Everything takes you into the painting. Okay, well that concludes my painting today. Let's put a mat around and take a look at it. We're broadcasting around the world today. We're all the states in the U.S. and televising all over the world. And I'll have a copy of this video on LinkedIn tomorrow morning from YouTube, and it'll be on the LinkedIn site for those around other parts of the world that can also see it. Also see the broadcast. So let me put a mat board around this. My last step now is just to show it off. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, the idea here was to eliminate a lot of detail down here. I used a lot of work with the using the credit card, but then I could tone it down with different values. I went back with a spray bottle at the end to tone it down. Let me show you what I did earlier to give you the same idea. I did another version earlier for to practice the painting. Let's put that out here. All right, and I see here I put a little more detail here on the foreground as far as those lines that go into the impact area, and I put just a little darker color around the impact area. But I think this one turned out to be very effective also. So let's go to my main table. Right. Okay, that was a good exercise in painting rocks, and I'm sure when I started out by talking to you about painting rocks, I don't think you would expect what I did there today, because painting rocks can become not only complicated, but depends on what kind of rocks you paint. And I wasn't trying to do a rock, which I demonstrated in the beginning, but I wanted to use the rocks in the landscape as an example of how you can simplify, but also using the element itself to impact the painting and also help the painting show its character. And the character of that particular location there was a waterway scene. It had lots of rocks. It had that boat ramp there, and of course it had a little bit of trees around, a little bit of water. And I was really trying to find an interesting shot there, an interesting location, and also go over how to display the rocks and how to do a better way to paint it. I think the scraping technique is very effective. It's not the only way to do rocks. You can do rocks with splattering. You can do it just by using the paintbrush. That's fine. But then also to tone it down on the edges, so your impact area is the area you want the viewer to go to. Well, that concludes my presentation today. I hope you all have a safe week and happy painting. And I'll be back again next Thursday at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.